Welcome back. Some more visuals coming in of Amit Shah taking charge as the Home Minister. Remember that he held that portfolio in the previous term as well. So that is Amit Shah. Those are some visuals coming in, him taking charge as Home Minister. Well, we'll keep getting visuals through and through as they come through. But as of now, let's concentrate on one particular topic, which is to do with the elections. According to Fitch, the outcome of the recent election is expected to support broad policy continuity, with the government continuing to prioritize infra, capital expenditure, improvements to the business environment and gradual fiscal consolidation. However, coalition politics and a weakened mandate could make passing legislation more challenging. The post-election budget is in July and is expected to provide greater clarity on economic reform priorities and fiscal plans. We have with us Jeremy Zook, who's the Director, Asia Pacific Sovereign Fitch Ratings, joining in now. Jeremy, hi, welcome to the show. Well, it's been a couple of days now since, the election mandate. Give us a sense in terms of what you think the priorities would be for the new government, especially when it comes to infra and capital expenditure.
Yeah, thanks, Ekta, and thanks for having me on this afternoon. So I think at the risk of being quite repetitive to what has been mentioned earlier in this program is that this next administration is all about policy continuity. And I think, certainly the appointments in terms of the ministerial portfolios kind of signal that policy continuity is quite important. We do see some new faces, of course, but there are a lot of old hands coming back to manage their portfolios. And importantly, in the finance portfolio, the finance minister is returning. So I think, this sends a signal that, again, these core economic priorities that the Modi government had in previous administrations will continue. And that's really around this capex push that we've seen become quite important for the government over the past several years. And a continued emphasis on helping to push through ease of doing business measures and trying to improve India's competitiveness through reducing regulation. And then around fiscal consolidation, we do expect the government will continue to try to achieve its fiscal targets and reach that 4.5% fiscal deficit that it's had set for several years now. And so that's kind of our expectation. And I think that's a lot of what we've seen with the government's announcements so far. Now, of course, this government will be very different than past governments in that the BJP no longer has a sole majority. And so that does mean a little more jockeying amongst coalition partners and a little more negotiation that could make it a bit more challenging around some of the more contentious reforms on land, labor, and agriculture. But I think for the most part, that capex push, importantly, will be sustained. And we think that that's an important factor behind some of the strong growth momentum that we've seen recently. And so we expect that to continue.
All right, so continuity is the order of the day, with accelerated focus on what was taking place in the previous term, only to increase in the next term as well. Jeremy, but you did mention there were a few new faces. What have your readings around them been, and what are your expectations from those ministries?
Well, I think, again, we'll have to see, I think, in the coming weeks, coming months, where the government goes in terms of its priorities. This is, while it is the same NDA government, again, because the coalition partners are playing a more important role, I think some of the priorities may shift modestly, I think. But I think, we'll see in the July budget document where a lot of the policy priorities go and how aggressive the government decides to be in terms of pursuing its reform agenda and fiscal consolidation over the next 5 years. So I think for us, that's quite an important marker to watch in terms of where we go from here.
What, according to you, would be the shift in those priorities? I mean, what kind of priority shifts are you seeing, even though modestly? All right. I mean, we'll come to you. We'll come to you, Jeremy. I apologize. We also have visuals coming in from Mr. J.P. Nadda take charge as the minister. So obviously, we have been, looking at these ministers taking charge, and J.P. Nadda obviously has taken charge as Minister for Chemicals and Fertilizers. So there you have it.
Yes, absolutely. But go ahead, Mangalam, you had a question for
it was just a follow-up. He said that there could be some modest shifts. Where do you see that happen, and what could be the nature of those shifts?
I think one area to watch for, I think, is on the fiscal front. So while I mentioned that capex will be quite important to the government, and we think that will be sustained, there may be a bit more, I suppose, jockeying around fiscal spending, especially as the government is set, in our view, to continue on its gradual consolidation path. And so as consolidation continues, that does make some trade-offs around spending a little more challenging, and maintaining high capex does come at a cost of other social spending priorities, and so there could begin to be some shifts around that. Again, it's not necessarily our expectation that would occur, but I think that is a potential risk when you do have a coalition government in place.
Well, Jeremy, based on what you're saying about the coalition politics, negotiation is going to become tougher. Do you think that eventually those tough reforms are going to see the light of day? What is Fitch factoring in when it comes to the passing of those reforms?
So when we look at our medium-term growth outlook for India, we expect growth to remain quite robust. So we're forecasting 7% growth in the current fiscal year. And forecasting that will remain quite strong at about 6.5 next year and about 6.2 over the medium term. And in that medium-term growth outlook, we don't factor in any explicit reform measures by the government. That growth outlook really reflects just the strong underlying momentum in the Indian economy, the fact that public that bank and corporate balance sheets seem quite healthy at the moment, and again around that capex drive. So when it comes to reforms and some of the contentious reforms, in the last government, we did see efforts to pass agricultural reforms and labor reforms. The agricultural reforms were withdrawn, and the labor reforms are still making their way through at the state level. So a lot of these reforms are very contentious, and it wasn't our base case that they would be passed in this coming term. But I think if they were to pass, that would give some upside to India's already strong growth outlook. And when we think about a lot of these reforms, I mean, these are concurrent reforms, and so state governments are also taking a lead in pursuing land and labor reforms that I think are just very fundamental towards improving India's economic competitiveness globally.
Jeremy, if you could just briefly tell us, Fitch's outlook on India is BBB- with a stable outlook as of Jan 2024. What would change this, to say a positive outlook or the rating as a whole?
We have seen some positive trends in India's credit metrics over the past several years, certainly on the growth and the external fronts. Where we still see a bit of a constraint is when it comes to public finances. So going back and talking about the strong growth outlook, that will support just a continued improvement in some of the fundamental structural credit metrics around GDP per capita, around India's share in global GDP that we do factor into the ratings. External finances are continue to be very healthy and have helped India to navigate a lot of these shocks. But when we look at fiscal policy, while we have seen, a continued fiscal consolidation, and we have seen a growing commitment to this gradual consolidation path by the government, if we compare India's government debt and fiscal deficit metrics to rating peers, they are on the elevated side relative to those other sovereigns. And so I think, in terms of looking at what could drive a positive rating action, we're paying quite a lot of attention to this fiscal consolidation path, especially what happened.
Apologies, we'll have to keep that short because we are considering